Milena Adamczewska-Stachura. She is going to be talking on our call for change, presentation of recommendation paper on family rights of LGBTIQ plus persons for the EU, Bulgaria, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania and Slovakia. Milena is a lawyer holding LLM in international human rights law, specializing in anti-discrimination law and protection of the LGBTIQ plus rights. From 2018 to 2020, worked in the Department of Equal Treatment in the Office of the Commissioner for Human Rights, including strategic legislation against the so-called LGBT-free zones. Nowadays, she coordinates the Law Does Not Exclude Fund. Milena, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. It's really a great pleasure to be speaking again in front of people in the room, not sitting in front of my computer. And I think that after these years of difficult times, we all are happy to be here together in person. So, as was actually introduced, I will be speaking of recommendation paper that summarizes our project RISE, already introduced shortly by previous speaker Kaspars. But before getting into the recommendations in the paper, I'll actually like to start with a very revolutionary statement. So LGBTIQ people start families. No matter where they live, no matter how many social or legal difficulties they face. And this is, of course, a joke or a truism, we can say. But at the same time, unfortunately, for a lot of politicians, for a lot of people, this is still the way of thinking. They close their eyes, they close their ears for the reality, and they pretend that LGBTIQ families do not exist. What's even more difficult for the families is that it's not only the politicians, it's not only the societies that are blind, it's also the laws that are blind. And I will refer again to this great slide of a blank white page. Indeed, in the 6 countries that we discuss here today, that are gathered here today, there are absolutely no regulations for LGBTIQ families. So it means that the law doesn't allow these families to in any way legally recognize their relationship. It means that there is neither joint nor second parent adoption. It means that the law doesn't allow for common usage of assisted reproductive treatments. It excludes these families from the legal reality. And yet they still live in these states and they still live their lives. So what was great part of the RISE project were actually in-depth interviews, the focus groups that were conducted with rainbow families living in these countries. And here are some examples of what these families said. So what they've mentioned is that they actually feel that the state stands in between them, that the state completely ignores them and their families, or, as I said before, pretend that there are no real emotional ties between them. They've mentioned that they are scared of what will happen if one of them dies. They're scared to actually interact with any public institutions because they feel that they are their enemy. They are scared of living their life openly, and they are scared even of walking down the street, as the quote from Poland mentions. So actually what's interesting is that despite the fact that the 6 states deny reality and deny these emotional ties that are there, sometimes these emotional ties are actually legally confirmed by non-discriminatory laws of other EU countries. So rainbow families travel, they start their families somewhere abroad, and then they want to exercise the freedom of movement, which actually makes it even more complex and more problematic from the legal point of view. But I'll actually come back to that. So although by maintaining this state of affairs, the 6 countries effectively discourage many people from travel back to their countries, they still do. And we hear more and more voices of protest, but also more voices of social support. And the numbers here actually show the quite recent support for either marriage equality or any kind of legal recognition of same-sex partnerships. And these numbers are on the rise. Although, on the other hand, as the example of Bulgaria shows, the anti-LGBT campaigns run by many conservative politicians are also successful, and in some cases, they can result with lowering of social support. So, as a part of the RISE project that we summarize here today, the recommendation paper has been prepared, and it actually brings together all these voices of protest, these voices of demands, what we want to be changed. Civil society organizations from each state drafted a chapter specific for certain countries. So each chapter actually contains the summary of legal situation of the main legal problems. But what's most important, it actually ends with certain recommendation of needed changes. And what is interesting is that there are actually, I'll come back to that there are actually a lot of similarities. So the challenges which I've mentioned in the beginning, the fears that LGBTIQ families share, these are of course what is there in common. But interestingly, there are also similar hopes. And one of these hopes is what my previous speaker called clearly juristocracy. So what is happening in courts in all these 6 states seems to have more or less, let's say, give hope for progress, that we can fight for rights, if not in the parliaments, then at least in courtrooms, that definitions of family are very often interpreted more and more broadly and led to be inclusive towards rainbow families as well. So these are for sure the cases of Bulgaria and Latvia, but also in Poland, even though indeed the progress is not as big as we would like it to see, there are judgments of Supreme Court, for example, that let us understand persons cohabiting with each other, also as persons of same sex. So we share these hopes, we share our recommendations for change, but what is also most important, I think, is that what all these 6 states have in common is that they are the members of the European Union, which brings the topic of the EU and of the role that the European Commission can play here into the picture. While ensuring the protection of LGBTIQ family rights is a competence, but most importantly a duty of national legislation, when rainbow families start to exercise their freedom of movement and travel within the EU, in all these cross-border situations, it also becomes a duty of the European Commission. And we've heard the Commissioner Dalli mentioning in her video today, but also in many previous statements, we've heard also President Ursula von der Leyen saying that the Commission is working on the horizontal legislative proposal, which should, let's say, help rainbow families in this cross-border situation, and which will make it possible to recognize the family ties, the relationships between 2 persons, but also between them and their children in different countries. We are waiting for this proposal, but at the same time, we don't know where it will come, right? Like, we don't know if it will be 1 year or if it will be 2 years or even 5 years before it's implemented. And in the meantime, these families that we work with on the ground, these children who are denied their identity documents solely because in their birth certificates there are 2 mothers or 2 fathers mentioned, these children need these documents now. So this is why in the recommendation paper we also suggest certain interim measures, certain non-legislative legislative actions that the European Commission can take, as, for example, revising the guidelines on free movement to reflect the diversity of families, to propose certain communication, how to clarify the scope of the free movement directive so that the terms used there as partner, parent, child are actually also inclusive towards rainbow families. And we also call for European Union to support strategic litigation run by civil society organizations in front of CGEU on the national level, because as I've mentioned, there's a lot of hope in courts. So this quote of President Ursula von der Leyen has been, I think, cited thousands of times since she said that in 2020. And these are beautiful words, but still, these are only words, and we need European Union to act and not only to speak out about it. And actually, I would like to end with, let's say, also a little bit motivating maybe statement that we still believe in change, I think, and we work for it every day, and this is why we are all here. And what we need to do is to create awareness of the inequalities that exist there, to speak out that many families are actually harmed by the law, not protected by the law. And we hope that this project, that this recommendation paper that we prepared can be a helpful tool for those who want to speak up, and that it can be a sort of a signpost for those who maybe finally want to listen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And before we go to the next stage, the Blitz Q's and A's, I would like to ask if anyone from the floor has a question or questions to our distinguished guest from Poland, from Jakub and Milan. Anyone would like to ask a question? Okay, so we have an active member of the audience. Here we go.
Hello, Milena. My question would be, perhaps you could reflect a little bit on your experience working in the Polish Commissioner for Human Rights, and whether you have had any cases dealing with family-related concepts.
I don't know if I should go back to the stage or
yeah? It would be easier to. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so thank you for the question, and this is actually the topic that I could be speaking here for about 2 hours, thanks to all mentioning all the interesting cases that we had in the Office of the Commissioner. Maybe just very briefly, so it makes sense when I speak about the cases to mention how the Office of the Oh, yeah, sure, I have the microphone here. How the office works. So actually every Polish citizen, but also every person living in Poland can submit a motion to the Commissioner for Human Rights to consider and to do something, to either contact certain institutions that are violating the person's rights, or to even start legal proceedings. And I've been working in the Department of Equal Treatment, and I've been responsible for all the motions from LGBTIQ people, or all the cases related to LGBTIQ rights. And it was actually interesting to see that once this anti-LGBT campaign run by the government was initiated in 2019, actually it was back then when the amount of motions that we've received from the community highly increased. So we were, of course, well, on the one side, sad to see that, right? Like that the discrimination is actually resulting with the problems, but at the same, happy to see that the level of under-reporting, so people being afraid to actually ask for their rights, is also not that bad anymore, that more and more people want to submit a case and do something about it. And referring to your question about like what kind of cases we had from rainbow families, I think the majority of them was related to the situation of children of same-sex parents coming back from other EU countries. So what I've mentioned shortly in my presentation, that this is in Poland, highly problematic issue. There are lots of families, especially from the UK, I must say, but also EU countries, and also sometimes third country nationals coming to Poland like the child has 2 moms or 2 dads in birth certificate, and suddenly our legal system is completely blind for that situation. Like they don't want to admit that this child is there, that it is like the child is Polish national, and that they need an identity document to be able to travel within the EU, to actually like use healthcare system, to use public education, to to live in the country. And we've been like fighting that in courts. With some successes, with some troubles. I would say that now the level of the situation is that we are waiting for the CJEU judgment in the very similar Bulgarian case to see if, let's say, from the bottom-up level, we can wait for Polish courts to apply EU law and to finally issue identity documents. But that was like a fight that we had in the office of the commissioner. Now I'm not there anymore, but I'm actually continuing to work on that issue as well. Thank you.